Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So now with spring well underway, I thought I'd just take a few minutes while I'm out on the bank to run through my top 5 fishing rigs for spring carp fishing. In no particular order, these are just 5 rigs that I absolutely love, and they're pretty much my go-to rigs most of the time throughout the year now, but more so in spring. A lot of these sort of come into their own, you know? So let's just jump straight in. So rig number 1, my go-to rig this time of year, if I'm just coming onto a new water or even an old water, to be honest, and I'm just trying to find the fish, my go-to rig tends to be the Hinge Stiff Rig. So as you can see, loads of movement in the rig. It sits quite high actually, higher than a lot of the sort of the most popular pop-up rigs these days, like the Ronnie rigs and stuff where they sit down really low. This sits up quite high, loads and loads of movement in there. Really robust because it's tied with really rigid, stiff material. I never really change the booms, to be honest with you. I can just change over the hook length sections as I go. Absolutely deadly rig. I like these ones for a couple of reasons. One, because they sit up a little bit higher than most rigs, and this time of year when the fish are just starting to wake up, they're sort of cruising around the lake, not really feeding hard, and they're just sort of warming up as they're following that sort of that warm sun line, especially on the northern bank for most of the lakes where the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So that northern bank gets a lot of sunlight. So I tend to find fish a lot on the northern bank of these lakes. So yeah, my go-to rig to sort of chuck at them this time of year would be a Hinge Stiff Rig. Also, we've still got a lot of sort of like silkweed, the lake I'm on at the moment, loads of silkweed, loads of low-lying weeds, so a Hinge Stiff Rig presents perfectly over the top of that. That's an absolute killer rig, and I'll probably just change up the hook bait, play with a couple of different colour hook baits and just have a go, see what works for you. So for my rig choice number 2, we're going to go straight in with this one. This is pretty much my favourite rig of all time, to be honest with you. Anyone that follows this channel is going to know that I use these absolutely everywhere, and that's the solid bag. Yeah, the most simple rig there is, really. I'll tie mine with a little leader. As you can see, it's super supple, leadless lead core. I love these little leaders, and then just fish it like that. So fishing it basically drop-off style, so tail rubber on this side, and then just like a double ring swivel this side. So the swivel end goes in the lead. One loop goes to the leader, and one loop goes to your rig. So as soon as you get a fish, bump and the lead's off. Brilliant for safety features. Also, let's get that in focus. Also, because it's such a short rig and because it's hidden, just the nature of the rig, super supple, tends to sit quite coiled up like that because obviously you've got all of the ground bait and all of the micro pellets. I love to fish it with like the little 2mm crayfish mini mix pellets from DNA Baits. I like to fish them like that, just literally all tucked in together, hidden, and the hook tends to sit either just slightly cocked like that, or it tends to sit just on its side. So the wafters sit perfectly like that, and this is just a bright little PB wafter on the side there, little 12mm, and everything's hidden underneath a pile of bait when you present them. So pretty much the perfect camouflage for basically any presentation. And I'll basically put these anywhere other than silt. So silt's the only place I won't really fish these, just because they tend to sit down funny, they bury themselves down. I've never really played around with it too much, but I just don't like the idea of the presentation. No doubt you'll probably still catch some, but it's not my favourite, it's not my go-to. But for everywhere else, this is absolutely killer. And the reason this is so good for spring fishing is because if you are, especially early into spring, when you're just coming out of winter and they're not really feeding properly, it's a really good way to just set like one mouthful of bait for those short sort of feeding spells. Yeah, you can sort of trap them like that. So if you're going to put it on like reed lines or to any features, anything like that, it's great because you can cast it and get it as close as you want. Or if you're casting to trees, like overhanging trees, you can sort of just brush the branches. It's going to punch straight through them, and you ain't got any worry about tangling up or anything like that. Just as long as you're fishing safe, that's the main thing. But they're absolutely killer rigs, and I've caught so many fish on them. Definitely one to put in your armoury if you're going to get out on the spring fishing. So yeah, for the next rig of choice, I'm going to go in with the Zig Rig, and I've actually got these on at the moment on my rods. Yeah, these are fantastic rigs. Today's session like this, the weather completely changed. It's not high pressure, but the sun's up and I found fish up in the layers. So this is a really good way of presenting a hook bait somewhere near a fish. Put loads and loads of fish on, especially on this lake, deep water. Fishing these as adjustable zigs, so I'll only tie it 2 foot long actually. Well, this one's about 1.5 foot, so there's not much difference actually between the bubble float and the hook bait, and it just does not seem to put them off at all. But yeah, fish them quite short, but you can fish them obviously fixed straight off the lead and just tie the hook link as long as you need it to be. Really good. You can top them with stuff, so like you can just thread a bit of cotton through or bait floss thread on a few maggots or a few worms, that kind of thing. At the moment, I've just got the Fox Zig liners on there at the moment with a bit of foam, but you can fish them with pop-ups. I know people that have fished quite big pop-ups with bits of corn and stuff like that, and they still work really, really well. But this is my favourite way of presenting them, especially with the little liner. Keeps the gape nice and wide on the hook there. The foam's absolutely perfect, especially if you get any hatches throughout the lake, especially a little bit later on in the spring, when you're getting into the summer, just before the fish start to spawn, then these are absolutely brilliant. And a lot of the time you'll get bites on these when no one else is catching. So fantastic rig. So for my next rig, I'm sort of doubling up with this one. This one is pretty much, well, it's multiple rigs really. This is kind of me cheating a little bit because I'm going to just say D rigs because that covers a lot of bases for me, because I play around with the D rigs and I use them a lot in different situations. My go-to this time of year for spring fishing, if you like, when the water's still really clear, and even through the winter, I really like these. And that's with a fluorocarbon, as you can see, well, you can barely see the boom section there. Yeah, little tiny boom section with a loop at the end, and then I've just looped on the hook section. So this is just basically a slip D with a perfect little loop at the end there. No knots in the middle, as you can see. Super, super clean rig. Really good anti-tangle properties on this one. I've never had issues with it ever tangling up or anything like that. And because the boom section's fluorocarbon, it's almost invisible in the water. Yeah, this can be absolutely killer, to be honest with you. You get the movement, you get the best of both worlds, because you get the movement here with the little hinge section and the little supple section there, like you would if you were fishing like a coated braid or an uncoated braid. And you get the rigid sort of section like you would if you were just fishing fluorocarbon straight through or like a coated braid straight through. But this has got the feature of being pretty much invisible in the water. So that's the reason I fish them a lot in the spring. But in the summer months, I'll tend to fish them more like this. So this is anywhere I can get away with it. It's a soft coated braid and I'll fish it straight away through, all the way through. You can either put a little bit of a kicker on there or a little bit of shrink tubing just to kick it round, or just leave it like this, and this works perfect as well. And that's the coated braid right through to the D section there. This isn't like a slip D, this is just a standard D on the hook. Just a little micro ring swivel there on the end just to attach a hook bait. And I love to fish these with snowman presentations. So with a bottom bait and then a little pop up on top. Sometimes I'll drill out between both and just put a little bit of cork in just to get that extra buoyancy. As long as it's not lifting off the lake bed, then they work brilliantly. Doesn't matter how the hook sits. Sometimes they'll sit on the side, sometimes they'll sit slightly cocked as well, but they're absolutely killer either way. And with the supple braid, then they sit up over all the debris and stuff like that. So that's my go-to. If I'm fishing over super clean ground, then I'll go for fluorocarbon straight through, and they work really well. And obviously you've got the benefit then, like today's session for instance, I'm on a lake where braid is completely banned, so not allowed to use any braided main lines or hook links or anything like that. So on like today's session for instance, when I used a D rig earlier on, it was just fluorocarbon straight through. But yeah, they're absolutely brilliant presentation, loads of different ways to present them as well, and that can be brilliant with wafter hook baits. If you fish it like the one I tied, the first one, with that little hinge section, I've actually caught fish on 3 different presentation ideas with this. I'm just playing around on a session one time. I used it with a pop-up, with a bottom bait and with a wafter. Works perfectly all the way around. I've never had an issue with any weird presentations or weird hook holds or anything like that. And yeah, with the little D rigs like this, I'll tend to fish them, especially a little bit later in spring, when you're starting to introduce a bit more bait. This works really well over a spod mix. So at the moment I've just got a couple of little stack of corn on there, little fake corn. That works absolutely brilliant for presenting, just on the side of the hook like that. But they work really, really well with sort of match the hatch hook baits, little wafters, snowmen. But if you're fishing over a spod mix or just a good bed of bait, generally this is my first go-to rig. So yeah, last but not least, probably the most popular rig on the planet at the moment, the Ronnie rig. There we go. Fantastic way of presenting baits. You can see why it's so popular. You can see why it's become probably the most popular rig on the planet over the recent years. Presents a hook bait really low. It's really robust because obviously you've just got metal components straight through to a stiff boom. I actually prefer to fish it with a supple braid, like a light coated or a soft coated braid. But if you're fishing over clear ground, then fishing it like this with a really stiff boom is absolutely perfect. I tied this one up specifically for this lake because again, braid is banned on this lake. This was a just-in-case rig. You can present a wafter on it perfectly or a pop-up, and I've never tried with bottom baits, but I know that pop-ups work really well. I've caught loads of fish in them like that. A nice aggressive hook pattern on it, and you can fish the hooks quite big. This is a size 6, but you can go up to a 4 or a 2. Fishing any sort of big fish waters or fishing abroad, you can step those hooks up, present quite a small bait because the bait's sitting directly above the hook, so the fish are feeding mostly from above. It doesn't seem to put them off at all. Never had any issues with fish being spooked off or anything like that. This one is nice and simple, basically just like a stiff boom straight through to a loop, and then on the loop we've got the little Ronnie section. Yeah, fantastic rig. Again, I'll fish these ones as singles or fish them over baits. I tend to fish these a bit more over a bit of bait because I like a spread of boilies when I'm fishing these. Just literally just boilie chops. Maybe a bit of pellet over the top, but mostly just boilies. Yeah, it can be really great sort of that late end of spring, coming into summer. and then right through the year basically. I mean, you'll catch on all of these rigs right through the year, but this just tends to be my rigs of choice for the spring, with those nice clear booms, because you've got to remember through the colder months like the winter, a lot of the weed and algae dies back, so you get really clear water, and you want to be able to present a rig that's not going to be just standing out like a sore thumb off the lake bed. Here today, I'm on a lake where I've got a big clay bed. Every other rig, dark materials, anything like that, just stands out like a sore thumb, so this clear materials work really well. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you'll be able to take something away, apply that to your own spring fishing this year, catch a few fish. If you do, let me know how you get on. If you try any of these rigs out, just leave me a comment, let me know how you get on. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit that bell for regular updates, give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one.